What if, in the stillness of night, when the world lies quiet, but your chest carries its private unrest, you realized that life is not a gift, but a compulsion? That the pulse inside you is not freedom, but the echo of an ancient command, whispering without pause, live, persist, strive. You never asked for this burden, yet here you are, nailed to existence, breathing because you cannot help but breathe. Look at your own hunger. It rises before thought, before choice. It is older than you, older than memory. You wake, and before you open your eyes, thirst, desire, and disquiet are already there. You never summon them. They simply appear, like jailers stationed at your bed. This is the will to live, blind, insatiable, indifferent to your peace. It does not ask if you want to continue. It commands continuation. Even pleasure is only the brief silencing of its demand. A meal does not bring joy, it only quells the gnawing. A lover's embrace is not the summit of delight, it is the temporary drowning of loneliness. Every satisfaction is merely the interval between two hungers, the silence between two strikes of the same hammer. And yet, the hammer never stops falling. You chase, and when you catch, the chase resumes. You drink, and the throat dries again. You rest, and restlessness soon reclaims you. This cycle is not a flaw in life, it is life. The will does not care for your serenity. It only cares for its own endless assertion. You might believe that modernity offers escape, that technology, medicine, and progress finally bring deliverance. Yet, look closely. The more we accumulate, the more we are consumed. The promise of ease breeds restlessness. The promise of connection breeds loneliness. We have gilded the cage, but the bird still beats its wings against the bars. Humanity is not free, it is only more distracted. And you, too, are distracted. You scroll, you consume, you speak of goals and passions as though they were your own, but underneath them is the same faceless command: strive, reach, continue. The language changes, but the whip remains. You call it ambition, you call it love, you call it destiny. But strip away the words, and it is only the will, indifferent and blind, whispering through your nerves. The will does not know joy, nor does it know meaning. It only knows persistence. That is why suffering outweighs pleasure, because pleasure is conditional, but suffering is constant. Hunger does not wait for your consent. Pain does not ask for your approval. The body suffers simply by existing. And yet, here is the paradox in glimpses of beauty. In fleeting silences, there is a kind of relief, as if the will loosens its grip for a breath. When you hear music and lose yourself, when you stare at the ocean and feel yourself dissolve, you are no longer the striving creature, you are no one. And in that brief anonymity lies a strange liberation. But the liberation does not last. The moment fades. The will reasserts itself, demanding, clawing, gnawing. The spell breaks, and you are once again thrown into the machinery of desire. Still, perhaps you notice for a moment you were free, not because you gained something, but because you ceased to want. That is the only true respite, not the satisfaction of desire, but the quiet extinguishing of it. So ask yourself now, how many of your days are spent in the chase, and how many in the quiet absence of it? Which side holds you more firmly? Which voice defines your life? The endless cry of the will, or the rare silence that interrupts it? What you must understand, as you sit there weary, restless, watching the world pass, is that existence itself is a tragedy. Not because it is intrinsically evil, but because it is incessantly demanding. Life does not ask for your participation. It simply takes you in, pulls you along, and bids you continue, as though you are a leaf caught in a violent current, drowning even as it floats. Think about it. There is no pause, no interlude between life and death. There is no such thing as neutral. To exist is to struggle, and the more you fight against this current, the more ferociously it pulls you under. It does not matter what you achieve, what pleasures you accumulate, or what illusions you cling to. The current does not care. You could be rich, famous, loved, it makes no difference. The will never quiets. Even in the moments you believe yourself most secure, when you feel you have constructed a fortress of comfort, the tide rises again with all its hunger and demand. You may try to build distractions, erect walls against its ceaseless pressure, But in time, those distractions will betray you. What can you do when the will itself becomes a cage and all the bars are made of your own desires? In that brief moment of stillness, when you feel at peace with the world, understand this: it is not the world that has changed. It is simply that for a fleeting instant, the will has released its grip. It has allowed you to glimpse something beyond itself, a place where desire no longer reigns. But that glimpse is only a passing breath. The stillness does not last because the will is ever present, ever hungry. It cannot be sated. It does not know the meaning of enough. Perhaps, in your quieter moments, you recognize this truth, that there is something cruel in being asked to persist without question, without rest. And yet you continue. You do not stop. You breathe because breathing is demanded of you. You eat because hunger compels you. You seek because there is no other choice but to seek. In all of this, you are not the actor, but the acted upon. And the will moves through you, directing your every step, pushing you toward yet another goal, another illusion of fulfillment. But if the will drives you, then who are you, really? Are you simply the puppet of an ancient force? Are you a vessel through which desires pass, playing out their cycle without meaning, without purpose? In moments of self-awareness, it may seem that your existence is not your own. You are not free. You are a vessel of need, ever thirsting, never satisfied. And so, this is the heart of it. You exist in a state of perpetual becoming, always striving, never being. What does it mean to be in such a world? In a world where becoming is all that you know, where every step is towards the next, and the next, and the next, until the end comes, not with a bang, but with the quiet, inevitable surrender to time. What is there to hold onto in such a world, except the relentless will itself, the very force that propels you toward your own dissolution? This is the cruelty of existence. And it is this truth, harsh and unyielding, that you must face, not with fear, but with acceptance. For in the acceptance of the will's unceasing demand, there is something liberating. The struggle ceases when you understand that there is no escape. The resistance ends when you surrender not to the will itself, but to the fact of its presence. Perhaps it is time you stop fighting against the current. Perhaps it is time you stop asking why. The why is an illusion, a question for which there will never be a satisfying answer. Instead, allow the truth to settle in like a fog around you, that existence is not a gift, but a burden. And yet, in this burden, there is the essence of life itself. For once you realize this, you are no longer struggling with the illusion of meaning. You are free from the lie that there is something to achieve. There is only the moment. There is only the next breath. And in that, there is no escape, but there is a kind of peace. Not the peace of triumph, nor of escape, but the peace of acceptance. And so, you are left with a question, not for the mind, but for the heart. Will you continue to struggle, chasing the false promises of satisfaction that the world offers? Or will you accept, as difficult as it may be, that the struggle itself is life's only truth? Will you learn to surrender, to float in the current of existence, not as a prisoner, but as one who has accepted that life itself is the only answer to the question it asks? In this acceptance, there is a quiet freedom. It is not the freedom of the ego, of the self, that imagines it can transcend suffering. No, it is the freedom of the spirit, not from suffering, but through suffering. And it is in that very suffering that you will find a strange, paradoxical liberation. There is a soundless law that binds all living things, one that is not written in scripture nor carved in stone, but carved into the sinew of the flesh itself. It is the law of continuation. You, like the insect, the beast, the starving dog, the ancient tree, are bound to it. You must live, you must persist. No matter how unbearable the weight, no matter how hollow the days, the current presses forward. Even when despair whispers its forbidden invitation, the body rebels against it. The will does not yield easily. It clings to life with claws buried deeper than thought. Look closely at the smallest creature crawling across the earth. Watch as it flees from the boot that would crush it. Even there, in that fragile speck of existence, the will asserts itself with ferocity. The worm writhes, the ant struggles, the bird fights to the last wing beat. There is no nobility in this struggle. It is not a triumph, not a testament to meaning, but simply the unyielding pressure of the will that cannot accept silence. Death arrives, but never willingly. It comes only as the final victory over resistance, not as an embrace, not as release given freely. And in you, too, the same blind clinging persists. You may contemplate escape, but how rare it is for thought to overcome the ferocity of the will's grip. Your own body betrays you, tightening its hold on life in the very moment you long for dissolution. Even in despair, your heart continues its drumming, indifferent to your weariness. Even in hopelessness, the blood insists on circulating. That is the will's cruelty. It does not align with your understanding. It does not ask for your permission. It is older than thought, and it obeys nothing but itself. Consider this. Everything you do, everything you seek, everything you build, all of it is only the will disguised in finer clothing. You name it ambition, you call it duty. You mask it in words like purpose or calling. Yet beneath those words lies the same raw compulsion to live, to assert, to propagate. The poet who writes, the soldier who fights, the merchant who labors, the mother who nurtures each is but an instrument through which the will continues its blind march. Strip away the illusions, and they are all the same, vessels of continuation. This is why satisfaction never endures. You imagine that by achieving, by acquiring, by arriving, you will silence the unrest, but each time you arrive, you discover there is no arrival. Desire mutates, grows, reappears in another form. The mountain peak only reveals another peak beyond it. The treasure, once obtained, loses its luster. The lover becomes familiar, and longing turns elsewhere. There is no final object that can satisfy the will, because the will itself is not made to be satisfied. It is made only to demand. And so you are condemned to chase shadows, reaching for relief that never lasts. Each moment of happiness dissolves as soon as you grasp it. Like water in the hand, it slips through your fingers, leaving you thirstier than before. What you call joy is merely the brief cessation of pain, the temporary dulling of hunger. But the hunger always returns. This is why life feels like an endless circle, not a line. It turns and turns and turns again, dragging you through repetition, never forward, only around. Do you not feel it? The tedium of days, the repetition of striving, the gnawing awareness that no matter what you pursue, the same dissatisfaction greets you again and again. It is as if you are walking through a vast desert, where every oasis is a mirage. You run to the shimmer of water, only to find sand beneath your lips. And yet, you run again, because you cannot not run. The will drives you onward, though it offers nothing real in return. There are those who believe progress redeems this cycle. They say, we suffer less now than those before us. We have subdued nature, we have lengthened life, we have conquered disease. But what is this victory, if not merely an extension of the same striving? To lengthen life is to prolong hunger. To multiply comforts is to multiply new forms of discontent. You still wake each morning with unrest. You still turn from one distraction to the next, unsatisfied. Progress decorates the prison, but the walls remain. Perhaps you think of love as the one redemption, the force that gives meaning to suffering. Yet love, too, is only the will disguising itself in tenderness. What is passion but the will's demand for continuation, dressed in poetry? What is longing but the ancient compulsion of reproduction, painted with illusions of destiny? The tenderness you feel is not false, but beneath it lies something merciless. The will's command that the species persist, that your body becomes the instrument of its survival. In this light, even the most intimate moments are not yours. They are the will's theater, where you act out roles written long before you existed. And when the child is born, the cycle repeats. The same thirst awakens in the new body, the same blind striving. You pass on not peace, not liberation, but the burden of existence itself. You may call it love, but it is, in truth, the passing on of chains. Each birth is the will renewing its contract, signing once more in blood that life must continue. Here, then, lies the bleak symmetry. Suffering perpetuates itself. Pleasure is fleeting, pain is constant, and yet the will ensures continuation. To be born is to be condemned to this cycle, and no amount of reason or progress can break it. Reason is but the servant of the will. It invents means to fulfill desires, but it cannot silence desire itself. It creates tools, but not freedom. The will reigns supreme, and reason bows before it, like a slave before its master. But perhaps there is another dimension, hidden not in the accumulation of desires, but in the rare suspension of them. Consider those moments when beauty strikes you into silence, the swell of music, the immensity of the night sky, the face of someone lost in sleep. For a brief interval, you forget yourself. You are no longer the striving creature, no longer the prisoner of hunger. You dissolve into the perception itself, and in that dissolution, you glimpse another state of being. In those moments, there is no striving, no becoming. There is only being, not the restless being of the will, but a being without demand. The world appears not as something to be consumed, but simply as it is vast, indifferent, beautiful in its own indifference. You, too, become indifferent. You no longer want, and in not wanting, you are free. This is the paradox that Schopenhauer exposes. Liberation is not in the satisfaction of desire, but in its silencing. It is not in the will's fulfillment, but in the temporary suspension of the will itself. And though these moments are rare, they reveal a truth deeper than all striving. That peace does not lie in having, but in not needing. Yet this peace is fragile. It cannot be commanded. It cannot be held. The moment you grasp at it, the will returns, demanding again. Still, the memory of it lingers, like the echo of a distant bell. It reveals that another mode of existence is possible, not beyond life, but within it, an existence where the will loosens its hold, and you, for a moment, are no one. And here is the most haunting thought of all. Perhaps the truest form of compassion is the recognition that all beings are bound in the same cycle of striving and suffering. The bird that flees the hawk, the child who cries in hunger, the old man who fears death, all are prisoners of the same will. To see this is to pierce through the veil of separateness, to recognize that every scream, every hunger, every restless night is a mirror of your own. Compassion does not arise from morality, but from the recognition that you and the other are equally caught, equally condemned. Thus the veil begins to thin. You realize that to harm another is to add more suffering to a world already drowning in it. And in this recognition, you step outside the narrow tyranny of your own will. You become, for a moment, something larger, something quieter. You see the suffering of the world not as distant, but as your own. But even this compassion does not end the cycle. It only reveals it more clearly. To know the truth of existence is to see its futility, its ceaseless repetition, and yet also its strange beauty. For in the very act of recognizing the will's tyranny, you momentarily transcend it. The will remains, but you are no longer blind, you see. And in seeing, there is a dignity deeper than any triumph. This is the cold clarity that Schopenhauer offers. Not hope, not salvation, but the piercing truth that life is will and will is suffering. And yet, in knowing this, you are less deceived. You no longer chase illusions with the same fervor. You no longer expect from the world what it cannot give. You walk more quietly, more soberly, through the days. You are less captive to the frenzy, less enslaved to the mirage of fulfillment. And perhaps, in this sobriety, there is the beginning of wisdom, not the wisdom of conquest, but the wisdom of resignation. To resign is not to despair, but to cease demanding from the world what it cannot give. It is to look at life without ornament, without false promise, and to accept it as it is, a cycle of hunger, of pain, of fleeting beauty, and eventual silence. And so you remain, here, in this moment, breathing, listening, bound to the will, and yet, somehow, in the very act of seeing it, slightly freer than before. And so you wander through the corridors of existence, each step echoing against walls you did not build, guided by a force you cannot name. Even in your deepest contemplations, you are not free. Thought itself is a servant to the will, bending to its unspoken law. Reflection does not liberate. It merely illuminates the mechanism of your own subjugation. You see the patterns of desire, the endless repetition, the cruel symmetry of hunger and fleeting satisfaction. You see the machinery, and yet the machinery continues. You cannot step outside it. Consider the illusion of time. You imagine it linear, a thread along which life unfolds. But time is merely the stage upon which the will performs its play. Each moment is identical in its demand, each day a mirror of the one before. Your birth, your achievement, your death, they are variations on the same theme, the insistence of the will that existence continue. You may measure your life in years, in accomplishments, in memories, but the will pays no heed to your measures. It only marches, indifferent and inexhaustible. Look closely at your own suffering, and you will see that it is both personal and universal. The ache of loss, the gnaw of longing, the quiet despair of unrealized hopes, these are not anomalies. They are the natural consequence of life itself, the inevitable byproduct of being bound to an insatiable force. And yet, we act as though we are exceptions, as though we might find a haven where the will not follow. There is no haven, there is no escape. Even art, that fleeting consolation, is only a temporary suspension. When you admire a painting, when you listen to music, when you are lost in the narrative of another life, it is not that the world has changed, it is that for a moment the will releases its grip. You are transported, yes, but only for a moment. The moment passes and the machinery resumes, its hum relentless. And yet, paradoxically, this brief release is all we have. It is all that life offers that is not suffering. And so, the human condition is revealed in its stark simplicity. To live is to suffer, to strive, to want, and to be repeatedly denied. We construct our philosophies, our religions, our civilizations to mask this fact, to pretend that there is meaning in the striving itself. But the mask is thin. Look closely, and the contours of despair are unmistakable beneath it. Civilization itself is but a veneer over the naked, unrelenting insistence of the will. Consider the lives of those who seem most content. Even they are ensnared. The contented father, the devoted spouse, the successful scholar, all are bound by invisible chains. The father worries for his children. The spouse fears loss. The scholar hungers for recognition. There is no immunity. No life escapes the grip of desire. Happiness is merely the interlude between hungers, and peace is only the fleeting absence of want. And when you die, the will does not die with you. It continues in others, in the species, in the movement of life itself. Your death is not cessation, but transition, another beat in the unbroken pulse of desire. The will persists beyond individual existence, indifferent to your personal suffering or triumph. You are a single wave in an infinite ocean, and though the wave rises and falls, the ocean remains, vast and unceasing. It is this realization that can awaken something strange and terrible, the understanding that the world does not exist for you, nor for anyone. The world exists, and you exist within it, not as master, not as sovereign, but as an instrument of the will's relentless insistence. Every moment of joy, every achievement, every hope, all are fleeting shadows cast upon the indifferent machinery of existence. Yet, paradoxically, there is liberation in this understanding. Not liberation as you have imagined it, not triumph over suffering, not the attainment of desire, not the fulfillment of illusions. No, the liberation is quieter, more subtle. It is the acknowledgement of the futility, the resignation to the impossibility of ultimate satisfaction. In this acknowledgement, you step outside the petty tyranny of personal expectation. You cease to demand from the world what it cannot give. And in this suspension, you taste the rarest freedom, the freedom of detachment. You are still bound, still alive, still compelled, yet you are no longer deceived. The world no longer promises that which it cannot deliver. And in that recognition, the sting of desire dulls. The will continues, yes, but you are aware of its tyranny. You see it in its entirety, and in seeing, you no longer mistake its demand for purpose. Then consider suffering itself, not as an aberration, but as the core of existence. Pain is not a punishment. It is the natural manifestation of the will's compulsion. Hunger, fear, disappointment, grief, these are not accidents, nor the result of moral failings. They are the inevitable expression of being bound to the will. And the more closely you observe, the more clearly you see that pleasure is no more than the temporary quelling of pain. To live is to oscillate endlessly between these two states, never escaping, never finding permanence. And yet, in suffering, there is a peculiar clarity. To experience pain deeply, to recognize its origin, not in circumstance, but in existence itself, is to see the will naked. The veil of illusion falls away, and the machinery of life is revealed in stark detail. There is no comfort here, only truth, but truth, for all its austerity, carries its own quiet illumination. To know the world as it is, without adornment or hope, is a kind of awakening. You may ask yourself now, why continue to live with such knowledge? The answer is not in reason, for reason has no command over the will. The answer is simply that the will drives you, and you continue, because there is no alternative. Life is not a choice, it is a compulsion. Even knowing its futility, even recognizing the inevitability of suffering, you persist. And in this persistence, a strange dignity emerges. Not a dignity of achievement, but a dignity of endurance. To endure is not to triumph, but to bear witness to the unflinching truth of existence. And so you see that even compassion is a form of endurance. To recognize the suffering of others, to feel it mirrored in your own experience, is to extend awareness beyond the self. You see the child crying in hunger, the stranger shivering in cold, the old man trembling with fear, and in seeing, you are not removed from them, you are entangled, bound by the same unrelenting force. Compassion is not an act of kindness, it is the recognition that suffering is universal, that no life escapes the will's relentless insistence. In this recognition, there is a strange inversion. The self becomes smaller, and yet the awareness of reality grows larger. You no longer see your suffering as unique, nor do you see it as meaningless. You see it as one note in an unbroken symphony of desire and pain, a note repeated across millennia, resonating through every living thing. And in seeing this, the burden of solitude eases, for you understand that you are not alone in your ensnarement. And still, the will does not relent. It continues, pressing through the ages, pressing through you, pressing through every life that ever was and ever will be. You may resist, you may mourn, you may contemplate release, but the will not pause. Its persistence is the only law, its insistence the only truth. It does not bend for morality. It does not soften for wisdom. It does not yield for longing. It is as relentless as the tides, as indifferent as the night sky. Yet even here, there is the possibility of another perception. You can see the will not as a master to obey blindly, but as a force to recognize, to observe, to understand. Awareness itself becomes a small sanctuary, a momentary distance from the machinery of desire. You are still carried by it, but you are no longer ignorant of its presence. You watch it move, and in watching, you gain a quiet mastery of perception, if not of life itself. And then comes the ultimate clarity, the understanding that all striving is futile, and that liberation is not found in attainment, but in negation. The will cannot be destroyed, but it can be seen for what it is. Desire can never be fulfilled, but it can be recognized. Life cannot be changed at its root, but it can be witnessed without illusion. In this witnessing, the mind is released from the tyranny of expectation, the heart released from the torment of longing. And so, you arrive at the final truth, the one that Schopenhauer dared to speak. The world is suffering, the will is unceasing, and yet, the knowing of this transforms existence into something both terrible and luminous. Not because life becomes easier, or because desire is silenced, but because illusion is removed. You see clearly, and in seeing, you are no longer deceived. And in that seeing, in that quiet acknowledgement, there is a breath, a momentary relief, a fleeting suspension of the relentless pulse. You are still alive, you are still compelled, but you are aware. And awareness itself is the small, fragile lantern that illuminates the edges of the abyss. Here, then, you linger, poised between despair and lucidity, between compulsion and insight. The will continues, as it always has, as it always will. But for the first time, you are not entirely its prisoner. You are witness, observer, seer. And in this witnessing, there is a strange, solemn beauty. The beauty of knowing the world as it truly is, without flinching, without hope, without escape, and yet, paradoxically, without complete despair. And now you stand at the edge, not of the world, but of understanding the precipice where recognition deepens into resignation. You feel the weight of the centuries pressing down, not as history, not as memory, but as the unbroken chain of suffering that threads through every life. You realize that existence has never been kind, that it never offered respite, that it never promised joy. And yet, here you are, breathing, thinking, aware. There is no escape, and in that truth lies the final confrontation. Observe the self, that phantom you cling to, that fragile notion of I that believes it can master reality. It is an illusion, a shadow projected by the machinery of desire. The I is never free. It is always the vessel of the will, a temporary form through which compulsion manifests. You imagine control, imagine agency, imagine understanding, but all of this is mere surface, decorative patterns cast over an endless force that moves without reason, without conscience, without aim. And yet, there is a strange liberation in seeing this. Not the liberation of joy, not the liberation of satisfaction, but the quiet, solemn liberation of detachment. When you recognize that the self is not master, that your thoughts, your longings, your griefs are the instruments of the will, you can begin to loosen your grasp. You do not fight, you do not resist, you simply observe. You let the current carry you, but you are no longer deceived into believing that it serves you. In this recognition, desire begins to soften. Not because the world has changed, not because the will has relented, but because you are no longer entangled in the illusion that satisfaction is possible. Every longing loses its tyrannical power. Every ache becomes a signpost, not of what is lacking, but of what is. You still exist, but your existence is no longer a battlefield. It is a quiet acknowledgement of necessity. Look at suffering now and see it for what it is. Pain is not punishment, misery is not judgment, loss is not injustice. They are the natural expression of life's underlying law. To resist them is to resist existence itself. To weep, to rage, to despair, all of this is valid, and yet all of it is futile. The only response that carries wisdom is recognition, the quiet surrender of understanding that suffering is intrinsic to the world, inseparable from life, inseparable from the will itself. And what of death, the great silence that all beings approach? It is not deliverance, nor triumph, nor escape. Death is merely the final affirmation of what life has always demanded, that the will continues. Even in the end, it is not your consciousness that matters, not your triumph, not your despair. The current carries on. Your death is a note in an endless flow, a single breath that vanishes into the greater rhythm, a single flicker in the unbroken night. But the mind can apprehend this, and in apprehension, there is a peculiar kind of peace. The self may vanish, the longing may cease, and yet awareness remains. Awareness sees, awareness witnesses. Awareness exists without demanding or striving. This is the quietest form of liberation, not the annihilation of the will, but the suspension of its tyranny in the space of consciousness. You are still a part of the machinery, but you are no longer blind to it. Consider now the ascetic vision, the renunciation of illusion. It is not heroism, not moral righteousness, not a path to favor from the world. It is the recognition that every desire is a chain, every attachment a weight, and that only in loosening these bonds can the mind taste even the faintest breath of release. To abstain is not victory, it is a withdrawal, a turning inward, a refusal to feed the machine that feeds itself upon your striving. Even the world of intellect and knowledge cannot escape this pattern. Philosophy, science, art, all are channels of the will. All are expressions of desire in subtle forms. Learning is not liberation. Curiosity is not freedom. Even the pursuit of understanding is a form of striving, a subtle manifestation of the same ancient force. To know this is to pierce the final veil. The mind itself, so proud, so restless, so insatiable, is bound to the will's compulsion. There is no refuge, no exception, no favor. And yet, the recognition of this bondage is a subtle, almost secret triumph. It is not a victory over the world, not a conquest of fate, but a serene acknowledgement that the machinery is inexorable, that you are carried, that you are acted upon. In this acknowledgement, desire softens. In this acknowledgement, suffering loses some of its sting. You remain, but your relationship to the world shifts. You are no longer a desperate actor, no longer a captive illusioned by hope. You are witness. In witnessing, there is a kind of communion with existence itself. You see the suffering of the countless lives that intersect yours, and you recognize their sameness. The infant who cries in the night, the lover who grieves, the old man who trembles all are enmeshed in the same will that compels you. Compassion arises, not from morality or affection, but from recognition. You see that suffering is not accidental, that misery is not a flaw, that the world's cruelty is not personal, it is universal. And in seeing it thus, your sorrow takes on a reflective, almost luminous quality. And here, perhaps, is the final turn. The understanding that there is no ultimate redemption, no lasting satisfaction, no promise beyond existence itself. All striving is futile. All desire is transient. All beauty, all joy, all tenderness it passes. The only permanence is the will, and your only liberation is to see it, to recognize it, to hold it in awareness without being consumed by it. And so you linger, poised between despair and lucidity, between craving and resignation. You exist, but you are no longer deceived. You breathe, but you no longer hope for fulfillment. You witness, but you no longer mistake the machinery for benevolence. You see suffering, but you no longer imagine it might be avoided. You are present, and in presence alone there is a strange, solemn beauty, the beauty of truth, austere, cold, luminous. And as this recognition settles, a final image rises in the mind, a single candle flickering in the endless night, fragile yet steadfast, illuminating only itself and the small space immediately around it. The darkness remains vast, indifferent, unyielding, but for a moment, a lantern shines. You are that lantern. You are aware. You are conscious. You have no mastery, no victory, no triumph, only seeing. And in the quiet of that seeing, the question remains, suspended like a star in the void. If the will is unceasing, if desire is eternal, if suffering is inescapable, then what does it mean to be aware? Not to act, not to change, not to conquer, but simply to witness. You do not answer, you cannot. You only remain, a consciousness alight against the night, fragile, luminous, aware, and the world continues its relentless, indifferent course. The candle burns, and you listen to its quiet flame, knowing that all striving, all longing, all hope, all despair, all passes. Only seeing remains, only witnessing endures. Only the awareness of what is, stark, unvarnished, true, and utterly alone. And in that aloneness, paradoxically, there is the faintest, coldest breath of freedom.